park discussion.
That was a really small parking lot too.
Okay, good evening, everyone. With
Just
a
raise your
quorum of members present, I'll call the Committee of the Whole for Tuesday, May 28th, 2024 to order. We have, and we won't have open meeting running because we're not taking final votes here. This is an informational presentation. The second item on our agenda after call to order is an educational presentation by City County Park, Recreation, and Forestry Department relevant to the history of the joint department, their operations, an overview of a proposed contractual agreement, and potential solutions for the functional role of the city's Park and Rec Committee, which we've discussed along the way at a few different points here. But we decided that so that we all can get the information together as a group, that it would be efficient for Jamie to present to all of us, our park director to present to all of us at once, as we'll have some future decisions to make, both in our Park and Rec Committee, in our Finance Committee, here at the Common Council. So at this point, I'll turn it over to Jamie. I think she's got maybe a PowerPoint for us.
Yep.
And we'll let Jamie take it away.
All right, thank you. Well, thank you for allowing me to speak tonight and for calling the Council of the Whole to give a little bit of overview. I typically give an overview of our department with all the new council members and county board members anyway, just because we're a very unique system, but we have some things that will be coming forward in front of you in the near future for discussion based on what we've learned over the last couple of years. So I'll get right into it. And when I presented this to the county board last week, we had the storms coming in, so they said, talk really fast, so I got done in 10 minutes there. I'll try to not go quite as fast, but I won't take too long either here. So as Council President Rasmussen said, I am Jamie Polly, Parks, Recreation, and Forestry Director for City of Wausau and Marathon County. I've been in my role here for 6 years, born and raised in Wausau area, lived in Weston my whole life. Left for quite a while, came back 6 years ago. Family's still here, so one of those boomerang that's back. So enjoy my role here of being over both city and county parks and seeing everything that we can do within our park system. So I wanted to present this to you and to our county board member to give you an overview of a little bit of our department. I'm going to go over three things: who we are, what we currently do, what our mission is, what we're here for, how do we get here, because there's a whole history of how we got to the point, 100 plus years of history of how we got to where we are today, and then how we operate now and what the plan is going into the future, and really why I'm standing here in front of you tonight. So who we are. So right now we operate 2 different park systems. The city of Wausau has 39 city parks. We have our urban forestry program, which is 29,000 street trees that you'll see. Those are your boulevard trees. We run all your recreation programs. We have our specialized facilities, such as the Tuving Hill Athletic Park, skate park 400 block, a number of different things that are unique to our area. Then we have 17 county parks throughout the county, where we also have a special units like 9 Mile Recreation Center. We have our sports complex that's here in the city. We have Marathon Park. We have our Sunnyvale softball complex. So we have a lot of athletic complexes. But then also within our department is a 10 county forest unit where we have 29, actually 30,000, a little over 30,000 acres of county forest that we manage in addition to the park system. Part of our department that we operate is we also do the enforcement of our county parks with our county sheriff's department, and we work with Wausau PD on the city of Wausau parks. Unique to our department is we used to have a recreation deputy within our department that worked for my department, the previous director, and enforced all of city and county ordinances. He retired about 3 years ago, and with that, at that time, our sheriff he didn't want to deputize anybody who's not part of the sheriff's department anymore, which had been a long-standing where he would deputize people in different departments, and that went away for a number of reasons. So we are contracting with our sheriff's department now for 2 specific recreation deputies. One deputy, our department fully funds 100% out of our county budget. The other deputy is funded 100% out of DNR funding, grant funding. That's how they do the snowmobile patrol, ATV, UTV, and the boat patrol. So you see them out on Lake Wausau. Anytime they're out on Lake Wausau, they apply that to the grant, and that pays for that salary. So they work primarily in our county parks. That includes the sports complex, Marathon Park, DC Everest Park, which is our 3 county parks within the city. And they also work closely with your Wausau PD. They respond to some park or violations. Schofield Park is one they've been to a lot with dumping and stuff like that we've had there. So we have a really good relationship that way. But enforcement falls within that. On the next slide, I know you can't see it on the slide and you can't really see it in your packet either. I have these handouts, it's on our website. That's really just an overview of both park systems and then all the amenities within each park. So you can see it's not just that we have 39 city parks, 17 county parks, and 10 forest units. Within those, we have a lot of different amenities and try to make each park a little bit unique to what we have. So our mission of our department, and we changed this just a few years ago as the county updated their comprehensive plan and as the city was working on their strategic plan, our department mission, and this went through both the Park Committee and the Park Commission, is to adaptively manage our park and forest lands for natural resource sustainability while providing healthy recreational opportunities and unique experience, making our county a desirable place to live, work, and play. It should probably say city and county in there. This is stuff we're learning along the way as I get into that agreement, but that's our goal, and it does fall in line with both the city's strategic plan and mission as well as the county's for what we do. So our department is made up of 44 full-time staff, myself being the director, and I have 2 assistant directors, one over operations and one over community services. Our operations manager manages our 29 full-time park staff, and that includes our urban foresters as well. And then we have 4 managers there, and then our assistant director of operations oversees like our office operations and any special event we have, any rentals we have, our registration software, our website, any communications that go out. So we have the 2 different entities there. We also hire around 120 seasonal staff every year, majority in the summer. We hire about 60 to 70 lifeguards and pool staff alone for our 3 aquatic centers that we run, and then the others are our park operation staff that help with mowing lawns. Athletic park gets a whole crew to themselves. Sports complex gets a crew to themselves. So we hire quite a few seasonal staff. We're ramping those up. They all should be starting within this week or the next pay period, but pool's open on Saturday, so our lifeguard staff's on staff now. I wanted to point out, and this was something that our county administrator wanted to point out, is that as the director of the Parks Department, I do report to the county administrator because we are county employees, all of the department is. But there has been a longstanding practice for our administrator to reach out to the mayor, so he'll reach out to Mayor Denny when it comes to my review time to talk about how our department's been doing. When I work on my goals and stuff like that, the county does a mid-year and an annual evaluation every year, as well as rounding, where I meet with county administrator quite often. So that is about our department. Very fast kind of overview. Really, in a nutshell, it doesn't really, it touches on what we do, but doesn't get into the nuts and bolts of everything that we do. And we can go way deeper if we need to. But I want to go back to how we got here. So we are a unique department, one of, I think, the only city-county departments in the nation, or one of very, very few. And I have been to a lot of our national conferences, talked with a lot of colleagues. There are some entities that are similar where they have some agreements, but nothing like ours. So we are very unique. The department, or the parks department in this area started in 1905 when the Wausau Park Board was established. So that was what was established first. 1920, the Park Commission was established when the Historical Society gave Marathon Park to the county. Then 1925, there was discussion between the county and the city already back then of a single administrator to oversee both the City Park Board and the County Park Commission. So they were still two separate entities at that time, and in 26, the first administrator was hired. I am the fifth administrator of the department in the last 100 years. So that goes to show that we had some long-standing directors over the time. My predecessor was here 30 years, so he has a big chunk of that 100 years. That'll make him feel really good. So that was, we had it two separate, city and county, but one administrator at that time. Then in 1971, a study committee was put together and formed by the county board supervisor, actually decided to put this committee together to talk about how both entities were run, financials, equipment, personnel, and they met over 8 months and 11 meetings over that time. And what came about was a reorganization into one department in 1973. So what came out of that then was about the same time, and you can go to the next slide, was in 1973, the Wisconsin State Legislature also came up with Wisconsin State Statute of 27075, which gave the counties the ability, if they were under a population of 750,000, to oversee and manage city, town, municipal park systems. And then I highlighted just the first part, but it's a really long statute. So what you can read of it is that they can manage it and they have the authority to do that, but only the authority if the city, town, village wants to give up that authority and to provide that to the county. So that is what was done, and the city made that decision at that time to turn over the park system to the county. And they passed, and if you go to the next slide, they passed resolution 710550, which then was also adopted on the Marathon County side with their resolution that mirrored each other, which effective as of December 31st, 1974 at midnight, the city delegated all authority to the Marathon County to govern, manage, control, and improve and care for their public parks, parkways, park system. So that was giving all authority to the county back in 1974. What came about of those resolutions too was, and I don't think we put the resolutions in the packet, but if you want to see those resolutions, we have copies, and I think they're part of all of our research that Ann and I have done. And Ann's done this over the years for a number of different reasons. But what also came out of that is, effective at midnight, also the Wausau Park Board was to go away, and the Marathon County Park Commission, as it stood then, was also to go away. And the Park Commission was supposed to be reformed, establishing 3 city council members, 3 county board members, and a member at large to manage the entire park system, which included all city and county parks. At that time, too, all city personnel were transferred to the county. At that time, too, no personnel were let go. All the county agreed to take on all of the employees that the city employed, put them under their payroll. And all non-represented employees at that time were shared 50-50. And I'll go into how we do it today. Equipment and machinery were also split 50-50. So that was any equipment that was purchased then, and at that time, any city equipment came over to the county, and it was all put into operations, and we've been splitting equipment and machinery ever since. So I already covered the Park Commission, but on that Park Commission, just to clarify, the 3 city council members are appointed as a recommendation by the mayor, and they are given to the county administrator. The county administrator then appoints those 3 city council members to the Park Commission. The county administrator now appoints the 3 county board members. It used to be the county board chair. It's now the administrator. And then the member at large, there's an asterisk in here because it's changed over time. The original agreement said that the person at large could not reside within the city. They also could not be on the city council and could not be on the county board. When this was another agreement that came about in 1992, changed that one thing that still says they can't be a city council member and they can't be a county board member, so that it's not weighted one way or the other, but it took out the residency requirement. So now the member at large can be from anywhere in the county, including the city of Wausau. And our current Park Commission member, that's the member at large that's been appointed, which I will meet officially next week, does live in the city at this point. He is a city resident. So that's the Park Commission. And then going into a little bit more of the history, 1983 is when at that time we had 12 park rangers. So the city passed ordinances for the city parks. The county passed the county park ordinances. This resolution gave enforcement authority to our county park ranger, as well as the rangers underneath the deputy, I should say, and the rangers underneath him to enforce our city parks. So in the county ordinances, we've got a whole section that includes the city parks ordinances so that they can be enforced by the county as well as the city. In 1992, we signed an agreement for governance. Really, it clarified the makeup of the Park Commission, as I mentioned previously. 2002, that's when the forestry department, the county forestry department, came also underneath the department. So that's when we gained the forestry to our name. And that has worked really well. And that doesn't really have anything to do with the city other than we have that within our department that we manage as well. So we have a county forest administrator and 1 county forester to manage the 30,000 acres of county forest land. And then they work with the DNR. 2003, we had another agreement with between the city and county for liabilities of our employees. And this one we will be looking at again, but it is still, it renewed every year if it wasn't re-looked at. But it does cover the county employees that employ, like our lifeguards that work in city facilities, as well as vice versa. So that is the history of kind of set the stage for where we were. How we operate today is a lot really following the same guidelines that were set for us 50 years ago. Full-time and part-time seasonal employees are county employees still. Employees are now allocated based, though, on job responsibility. So we go through every year when we do budget time is we look at our previous year spent and how people allocated their time, because we do complete job costing. It's coming along in Workday, but we've got it figured out to a pretty good part, but it was an adjustment with our new ERP system. But we track every time we work in a city facility and every time we work in a county facility, and then we bill the city back on a monthly basis of the work actual performed. But when we do our budgeting responsibility, we look at where those are allocated. So my time right now, I think, is 40% city, 40% county, no, 45% city, 45% county, and 5% county forest. So I do have that aspect to my allocation as well, and that's how my salary is broken up. So we have our city forester, for instance. He's a 90-10. He's 90% city funded, and he's 10% county funded. Our urban forestry specialists, which are our arborists, are actually 85% city, 15% county, because of the work they do. Some of them times, if they're doing work in Marathon Park, that's a county facility, so it's charged to the county. So we work on our allocations and we make adjustments every year. Equipment and machinery is still 50-50, so when budget time comes, there's a rolling stock budget that the city approves every year. That's exactly 50% of our budget. The county matches that and has the exact same amount on that side, and that's how we manage our fleet each year. The city funds operate or pay for our operations of the city parks, And the city also funds any CIP projects. So that's completely separate of the county. I go through the city CIP process like any other department head. I go through the county CIP process like any other department head. And then you choose to fund those or not like you would with any other department. Those aren't included in our budget. And then I also mentioned that we use job costing so that we can bill the city directly every month, and then we know if we have an exact amount. And I did the comparison for our 2023 billing to what we had budgeted, and we were slightly over what we had budgeted, but very close. I think it was, and I have it somewhere, I think we were about $100,000 difference, but a majority of that is our utility costs. Which I had pointed out to Mary Ann before the end of the year of where we were going to be with that, because as you know, water and sewer rates went high, and the city pays for your use of our fountains, and everything like that. So our water rates, I think, was about 80,000 of that 100,000 is why we were over. So pretty close. I think we have a very good handle on our work that we do in the city and how much it costs us. And when we come to budgeting time, we use that. So. We also, as part of our department, we manage all the city-specific contracts, so like garbage, refuse, our contracts with the woodchucks. Same with on the county side, our contracts with the cyclones and the different user groups that come in. We maintain our registration software, which oversees both city and county, so that's a really good system as well. So same with our city billing. Any revenue that comes in for a city facility is part of that city billing every month. So the city gets the revenue for city operations, and you pay for the expenses for city operations. Same on the county. We maintain our website, so when the city and county both redid their website last year, it's been nice that the city and the county have worked together both on the financial and the HR system as well as our website, because then it's one source that can combine both of those entities. And for us, because of how we are joint, it makes it really easy to link the two together and stay within the same systems. We collaborate on initiatives with other city and county departments and different user groups. So I work with Public Works quite a bit on different projects. We've done the hop-up splash pads with the fire department. We try to intermingle as much as possible, same with on the county side, and then we work with the school district as well for all their uses of our facilities. And then we have a small project budget. So one thing the county and the city did prior to me coming, so I don't know how many years this has been, is they've given our department, the city gives $110,000 and the county gives $100,000, and I'm not really sure why the difference in the $10,000, but it's for deferred maintenance projects, anything under $30,000. That's usually been our threshold. If it's over 30, it comes through the CIP process. If it's under 30, it's part of that process, and that is really for us to keep up on our. As you saw, our city and our county park system are over 100 years old, so we've got facilities out there that need maintenance. A lot of it is just general upkeep that might be out of the ordinary, so that's what comes out of those small projects, and that has helped tremendously to at least keep a lot of those facilities operating and in usable condition for our community. So other things that we do for the department now, and this all kind of stems, but it's going forward with what we've been doing over the years, is we do our annual budget. So like I mentioned, I go through the annual budget process, same as any city department head and same as any county department head. So I get the best of both worlds to go through both systems. But we do that, and we do a 5-year CIP plan for both. I mentioned that. One thing unique about the city is we do have our 4 arborists and our city forester to maintain our street trees. EAB is a big plan that we've implemented a few years ago. If you don't know what EAB is, it's Emerald Ash Borer. We'll be giving an update to the city council or the Parks Committee at some future date of where we're at with that plan. It started out as a 12-year plan. I think it's more of a 15-year plan now, but ultimately we're removing all the ash trees within the city and replacing them with a more diverse canopy because the little green bug is going to take out every ash tree we have. So we're treating ones that we are not taking out right away, but eventually everything will be out. I work with all city planning department documents. I do our planning and construction services documents anytime we do a park project or building a park. I came on, as River Life was being built, so that's probably the last park that was built and that was already in the process as I come on, but I do have experience with that, and then just any other improvements. I already talked about the enforcement duties that we have, and then we update our outdoor recreation plans. So we do have a comprehensive outdoor recreation plan for the city and a comprehensive outdoor recreation plan for the county. These are required in order to apply for the state funding. They need to coordinate with the state outdoor recreation plan. So we keep those up to date. This is the next slide, Caitlin. Yep, thanks. So we keep these in line. My goal at first, when we updated both of them, was, and the city one has been updated, so we do have a current one that goes through 2027. County one goes through 2024, so we need to update that one this year. My goal at first was to make one outdoor recreation plan that we just abide by, but it would be such a large document, I think we might just keep them separate still, and it's easy to follow. It's not a big deal to us. But in addition to these, we also have a 15-year county forest comprehensive land use plan that is a large process we have to go through. We just updated, so now it's good for another 13 years. We did it 2 years ago. So just a little bit more, I'll kind of go through these quickly, just how we build our city and our county park system. So one thing to know about our department is when we manage our day-to-day work, we don't decide that, oh, today we're going to work on city stuff and tomorrow we're going to work on county stuff. We just have a list of priorities and where they need to go. We have a map of a route for like all of our mowers. They do the same route all the time unless, there's an emergency to come up. But we are one system. We've never, at least in my time here, my department, and I think for a few years even before me, is we are managing the properties that we're responsible for. We rarely, unless it's a CIP project, decide whether it's a city or a county park. We know what we have to get due. 1 week we may work completely on city property all week because we got woodchuck starting, we've got baseball games going, we've got bathrooms to open, and then the next week we'll be out in the county parks getting campgrounds ready or something like that. So we prioritize what we do, but we also build our park system with the help of other departments and other organizations. We apply for grants, we get donations, we have sponsorships like our People's Sports Complex, and then the amount of volunteers and partnerships that we have. We would not have the mountain biking system in our area if we did not have CWAC, which is our Central Wisconsin Off-Road Cycling Coalition. They've not only built Sylvan Park, they built up 9 Mile, they built out one in Ringgold. They're a huge partner. We've got Wausau Nordic, Wausau Pickleball, Disc Golf. The Canoe and Kayak Corporation has built what we have down on the river, a world-class kayaking thing. Our youth baseball, youth softball, youth soccer, all those organizations improve our facilities with donations, with time and labor that really help us keep the facilities to what they are today and improve them into the future. So we want those partners so that we can reduce our funding for city and county parks. We also do collaborations. This is mainly really with our recreation programs, but we work very closely with the different hospitals, with the Noon Optimists, with the Kiwanis. They sponsor a lot of our events that we have through donations, through volunteers. And we just had our 50th Children's Festival a few weeks ago that had over 8,000 people come throughout the day. And that's a huge event sponsored by a lot of different people, but one that is free to the public to come to, and they get a lot of community resources there. So, so why I'm really here and what to expect going forward. The history of kind of all of this, really, it's been, brought up year after year, and our city attorney can speak a lot to this. But 4 years ago, we had this thing called COVID. And what happened during that time is our health department said, you need to close these facilities, this, do this. So we followed those guidelines of our health department. And then the question came up of what authority do I have to close our city parks? So got with Ms. Jacobson, came through all of this, really brought out all the research she had done over the years with questions of our department and how it was put together, and then also how we operate today. So the county has full authority over the city parks, as you saw given in 1973. But what another part of that state statute says is that with that delegation could come or may come, it didn't say it has to come, but may come an agreement for services between the entity giving over the authority to the entity getting the authority. And then the entity giving up the authority, which would be the city, has the ability to fund operations to the county or the entity they're giving authority to keep operations to a certain level. That agreement was one we found was never put in place. All these resolutions were put in place with kind of gave us the skeleton framework, which we've been working by for 50 years. But there hadn't been anything put in writing of what does the city really expect of the county. I think we're doing a pretty good job of managing the city park system because I know me and my staff have high expectations of what our parks should look like. We live in this community too, and we know what they should be. But if we get into that situation again where I have to make a decision on a city park, I want to make sure that I have the knowledge of what you as a city council expect of our department going forward. This had come to light many years ago, I guess. 1992, my predecessor had done a contract for services draft, and then it never went anywhere. And why it didn't go anywhere, we have more files on that, but it didn't go anywhere as far as I know, and it was never adopted by either the city or the county. So that's kind of where we started. I took that template that I had found from 1992, and I did a lot of changes with it. I gave it to our city attorney. I gave it to our county attorney as well. Both have looked at it because the county has to agree to do certain things for the city. The city needs to say what they expect. So that is what's going to be coming forward to you, and that's what's a draft of it was in your packet for this meeting that you can ask questions about. That is what we're bringing forward to just put that contract in place so that there is this expectation from the city to the county of what you expect of the parks. Now, you as a city council, you still appropriate the money for the operations of the park department. So if you decide that you're going to appropriate less money, then I will tell you what that means for services. If we have projects and you allocate more money then because you want something done, then that's what we add to our plate and we will get that done. So you hold that authority still to manage what we do. And then, so what's going to be coming forward is that agreement will be presented to the Park Commission next week. We'll bring it through the Parks Committee too for discussion, but the Park Commission has the actual authority for that, so they'll see it. From there, it will come through both the city system, probably the Finance Committee, because although there's no new money being asked, all the agreement is doing is memorializing what we currently do and all the ordinances that have set the framework for what we do. It's really just putting it in writing. It's not changing how we do anything. It's not asking for any more funding. It's not taking any funding away. It's really changing nothing to what we do today other than putting it in one document so that in 10 years, when we're questioned again, we can pull up the document and it's got all of the framework there, as well as here's what was expected of the management of the system, and here's how certain things work. So it says how I go through the city budget process, how I go through the city CIP process, and stuff like that. What will also come of that is some ordinance changes, both on the city and the county side, to reflect that intergovernmental agreement that will be brought forward. On the county side specifically, in 2013, there was the ordinance that specifically changed my department's name to the Wausau Marathon County Parks, Recreation, and Forestry Department. If you look through the county ordinances, it says that name in some areas, but in some areas it just says Parks Department. So we're going to make sure on the county side that all of that's cleaned up and it's reflective of what we actually are, as well as on the city side as well. But that's more of a county cleanup issue that we have to do. So we've got some ordinance updates on both sides. We have some enforcement things we're going to bring through too that will change in the ordinances with the city, just to clarify who has the authority to do what, and have our law enforcement be able to enforce our park rules, whether it's city or county park. So as you can see, changes in funding or service level, current service level with this agreement nothing changes unless you decide to increase or decrease funding, really is what that is. So that's that. So before I get to the Parks Committee question, is there any question? I went through that really fast, actually.
That is a good place to take a pause, because if we get to where we're at, what we do with our committee really is a subsequent part of the question. So, we started to discuss this, I think, in the Park and Rec Committee, even as recently as our last meeting. And, it makes sense that when units of government cooperate, that really shouldn't be done with a handshake and no memorialization on paper, because all of us can change and the management and the staff can change. And so operating the way they've been, they have the authority and they have the money and they're doing the work, but there has been no outline of who does what for whom and what is expected of each side. They just are kind of getting it done, but there's not been a formal agreement. And I think that's where this discussion began, and we thought as a group, we should at least have some informational discussion and be able to ask questions as a group of Jamie with this agreement, because, at our organizational meeting, one of the items on the agenda that we did not act on was a movement to abolish the Park and Rec Committee, and there was not an appetite for that among us. And so we've got an alternate idea for that, but do you guys have questions at this time for Jamie about what you've heard so far? It's pretty quiet. That means that it's late. That means you covered it well, though. I think, does anybody, Gary, go ahead if you have.
Well, thank you.
Start us off.
But then who makes my basic question would be, who makes the decisions with regard to AstroTurf at Athletic Park? Who makes the decision whether that goes in or we decide not to do that? That came up from Parks. That came up to the City Council. Who makes that, under thinking today, who makes that decision with regard to things within the city?
Yeah, that's a very good question that I should have had as part of my slide, too. So the way that it operates is, if it's day-to-day function, if I need to be and fix some building, those type of things come out of our department as far as decision. If it's an improvement or any capital project or anything we don't have budgeted for that wasn't part of the budgeting process, as it is today, even with or without the Parks Committee, as it should be today, is it would come through a committee, so the Park Commission would be actually that authority that it would come through, and then they would make a recommendation. They're just a advisory committee, really, also, because on the county side, if it's any county improvement, it has to go through the Environmental Resources Committee, then it goes to the Finance Committee, then it goes to County Board. On the city side, it comes out of the Park Commission or the Parks Committee, but the Park Commission is that authority. Then it would go, same as it does for any other department head, it would go through City Finance if it has budgeting, and it would go through City Council. So in the example of turf, that would have started in a committee, so the Park Commission, if the Parks Committee wasn't there, Park Commission, make a recommendation, because it's a major improvement to a city facility, it would follow the city process and go through all the way up to City Council. So the City Council ultimately makes that decision. Same with on the county side, the County Board ultimately makes that decision. No committee makes, and no staff makes a decision like that unless it's a budgeted project that we've already discussed during the budget process, or if it's a day-to-day operation.
Okay. Does anybody else have questions for Jamie about what we've heard so far? We're not going to take action on it today, but I think it's good to get this information out.
So,
Gary, follow up, go ahead.
Just assuming that, how does something get to the Marathon County Park Commission? Then how do city, we have two people.
Three.
Not necessarily associated with any kind of a park duty in the city, because if we don't have a park committee as such, they're at large.
Well, your Parks Commission is made up of 3 city council members and 3 county board members.
But I'm saying but they are not coming out of a park group here in the city.
Yeah, but when things go to your park committee now, nothing comes out of, it's a city council member bringing something to my attention, or me knowing a project is coming and putting it on that agenda. So it would be no different than if it had the park commission or the park committee, it comes from somewhere. So it's either a park city council member that's on the park commission that brings up an issue that they want put on it, or, I mean, most of the stuff that goes on those committees comes from me as staff, knowing that it's coming. So I had worked with Mark McDonald, he made the request, we get it on an agenda. That would be no different. That's why your 3 city council members are on your park commission and 3 county board members are on. There's same thing with the county. There's no county park subcommittee. If it's a county park issue, it goes on to that agenda. So that would be the same as how it's done now.
Lou, question?
Yes, thank you. I don't recall when we remediated Riverside Park. I don't ever recall that being discussed at a commission level.
No.
Myself being on the Parks Commission, I don't recall that ever discussion being never taken there. So I'm assuming that was originated from the parks, from the city parks.
Yeah, so I might as well get into the park commission. Park
Yeah, I
commission.
mean, we're kind of, we're heading
Yeah.
to that direction anyway, so
Yeah.
I guess let's start to how we ended up with the city park
Yeah.
committee first, and then we can kind of walk through. We had an idea last month that may work to get us that input, so go ahead, Jamie.
Yeah, so as you saw in 1974, the park committee, the city committee went away, the county committee went away, and we had a park commission. We worked with a park commission, only a park commission, from 1974 until 2002. 2002, there was contention about what was expected of the county parks department, that the city felt like they weren't getting enough say. Now, again, no agreement was in place, so there was nothing to fall back on. It was really, from looking at the minutes and looking at history and talking with previous director, it was an issue with personalities, let's say, of who was in those positions and what they felt they were or were not getting. So at that time in 2002, Mayor Lawrence was the mayor at the time, created by a majority of the council. I guess that's how it has to be done, according to our city attorney, the Parks and Rec Committee, to be an advocacy, really according to the minutes, to advocate for city parks facilities. So the committee was added to the list of standing committees in the records, but no duties were given to that committee. So in the beginning part of that, and I don't know how long, there was this subcommittee that met just to talk about city issues. Park Commission was still the body that everything went through and was the overarching body, as it should be. Somewhere along the line, again, personalities and how they came about, the previous director started just taking city stuff to the City Parks Committee and just county things to the County Park Commission by practice. That is how it's been since somewhere after 2002 until recently, when this came about, and realizing the City Parks Committee really has no authority amongst your documents and amongst your ordinances. Also, the agreements were never changed and were never updated. The resolutions were never updated to bring back a Parks Committee. So right now, your authority commission is still your Parks Commission. And it doesn't make any sense, in my mind, if a county park commission is only going to look at county stuff, that we have any city council members on that commission. If we're going to have just a county park committee, then it should be county park board members or members at large or whatever. Same with city committee, should be city residents, and no county commissioners should be, or county supervisors should be on that. So that's where we come about, is it's been past practice. So yes, the last, I don't know, since 15 for sure, when the pools were talked about, the Parks Committee has done a lot of things and has talked specifically about city park stuff, where county park stuff has gone through the Park Commission. It's not how it's supposed to have been, it's how practice was. So that is what many of you know that have been around for a long time. That is what, you feel that the City Parks Committee had that authority to make all those decisions. technically, there wasn't an authority, but it went to the city council. The city council has the authority to make all the decisions like they still would with a Parks Commission. So that is where we are today, is talking about where we want to be. And if you as a city council want to have a park committee and have it be a standing committee, then we need to address the resolution that was established in 1974 that set up the Park Commission, because like I said, it makes no sense to have 3 city council members on a county commission that's only going to talk about county parks, if you're going to have a separate one. One other option that President Rasmussen said is that we could do an advisory committee, like the airport committee, is we could have a city parks committee that's advisory to the Park Commission, like the airport committee. And no matter what you decide, any city-related items will follow the city process like every other city department. Nothing that affects a city park goes to the county board. The county board doesn't make decisions for your city parks. And whether that is how it should be or not, that's not really clarified in all of those resolutions, but it makes sense because you as a city council hold the dollars to operate your park system, even though it's contracted with the county. So that's kind of where we're at, is yes, you are correct, and none of the Riverside Park stuff went to the County Park Commission because that wasn't our practice then.
Well, and I
Now,
think
what we should-
where we've kind of ended up is, and I guess it was observed as we were going through this research, partially between COVID and now, was that really what got created in 2002 was a venue for local discussion, to bring more council members into the realm of local discussion on issues that affect local neighborhoods. And I think that was part of why we were so interested in April of not letting that go, because we want to have local alders discuss local issues that affect their neighborhoods, because parks and recreational opportunities mean a lot to our residents. But that also is where we started to look at how could we achieve that without having to go through 50 years of policy documents to change everything, to wrest back control of what was delegated in 1974. And that really is where the discussion started about one way we could get that done is to use the airport committee model, where our city park and rec committee would essentially, and the council would vote to turn that committee into a non-standing committee advisory panel, just like the airport committee. It doesn't necessarily make the final decision, but it has an in-depth, informative discussion, and there's members in common. So on that committee now, there are members that are serving on that county commission. So as that local discussion unfolds, those members in common would leave that discussion knowing what those city alders would like to see happen. Then when they go to their park commission meeting, they're going into it informed with what they'd like to see happen so that they can advocate for that accordingly. And so since that county commission is balanced 3 and 3, it's got a fair city-county mix, that the discussion I had with Jamie was between that and the member at large and her as a director. It really is the job of those people to be present in the conversation and then advocate for what their community needs, and to run that properly to make sure that that conduit of information gets circulated. So, during the time when the City Park and Rec Committee was created, and I had talked with a couple of former members that had served during that time. Believe it or not, that's before me, 6 years before me. But in talking to some of those former members, at that time there were some tensions. And it wasn't only about operations. There was some gnashing of teeth about the location of where Westview Park would be. They found a better location, but the neighborhood that thought they were getting a park didn't want it there. And there was all kinds of arguments that took place within neighborhoods and with neighbors. And so, creating that venue for a deeper local discussion, I think, was the intent of where they ended up. They just didn't realize that what they were creating ran antithetical to what they had already agreed to 50 years before. And I don't know that they really took time to check, because they just assumed that they had the authority to create whatever they wanted and run it however they chose. And while it worked, it wasn't right. And until it came time to close parks and pools, that really was the catalyst to start to dig into first who has the authority, and then, to their surprise, they found out, well, guess what, it's not us. But I think when it comes time to have a local discussion about anything from, equipment replacements to park operations to cleanup to development to environmental issues, we still want to be able to talk about stuff locally and have 5 of us doing that. But I don't know that we necessarily need to go through and completely rework the wheel from 1974 if we can still have that discussion locally. And that's why the model that's used in the non-standing committee works so well. It works fantastically at the airport, because when the airport needs things, that committee, it has 7 people on it, gets together, they have those discussions, they do their capital plan, that goes to finance, finance entertains all of the money, and ultimately the council still makes the decisions. That same model would work here. It allows us to keep that local group talking, and so then when those members in common go down to the park commission, they know what to ask for and what to advocate for. And so I think that really kind of achieves both goals. We're not giving up our committee, but I think that it is conflictual for us to retain it as a standing body. But we have all kinds of non-standing committee, commissions, and boards, and they all function really, really well. So we could use that conduit to still have that local conversation if that would be preferable to letting that committee go. It seemed like in April, no one wanted to let that committee go. Chad?
Would the rules still apply then if something went to that standing committee and it got shot down? 2 of us could still bring it to the full council and the council would still be making those decisions?
Yeah, it would still, just like in any committee, if you have a non-passed item, it can still come to the council for discussion.
Okay.
Yep.
Right. And those members in common would be a part of that conversation, so they would know if something was conflictual or if it was an easy decision.
And city parks would still come to us and county parks would still go to the county?
Yes. Yep.
Right. So, and that's a future vote also. We don't have to decide that here tonight, but something to think about that, we certainly would talk about it, I imagine, next month in Park and Rec. And then, so ultimately, the council is going to have to make that decision. If we want to change that into a non-standing body and still continue to have local discussion, that certainly could be on those future agendas. Chad, and then Carol.
Can you maybe have a flow chart for us?
I can try to put one together.
Okay, thank you.
And Carol.
A
Might
flow-
need your
flow
help.
chart.
Thanks. So you said then it could go to the council for discussion, but can anything come out of that discussion? Do you know what I mean? If something gets voted down
Yeah,
by the
I think it
commission?
would be just like your example I think you had on the agenda tonight. Wasn't there something that, failed out of ED and then it came to the city council for vote? And I think it got passed tonight. I guess
It
I
did.
wasn't here. But, so yeah, it would be the same thing. Anything failed out of committee can still come to the city council for discussion, correct, Ann?
That's right.
Yes, but then what authority does the council have to pass any action? I think that's what Carol.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that is what I'm asking.
Park Commission.
Well, I think if it had to do with if it's something like that, it would have to do with funding, and it would be something, like I said, the city still holds all the funding and the operation. Like, you're going to decide what your expectations are for your city parks. If you decide that you want something that didn't pass out of commission, obviously you're going to know what those reasons are, and your 3 city council members are going to be part of that conversation and be here at that discussion to say why you might be advocating for it, even though it may not have passed commission. And then you, as a city council, you have the funding authority, so you would decide if it's going to do that.
I have an example. Oh,
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, so you brought up the AstroTurf. So say that because that's in the city, say if it was decided, if the commission members for the city did not want that, but it gets by the county commission members and the extra person, vote for it, then is there really anything that can be done? I guess that's what I'm wondering.
Yeah.
If it's something to be paid funding, okay, but what about something like that?
Well, it's you may not have the money there, but I see that as a very similar, it's a donation to your facility. It's a city facility. So you're choosing to accept that donation or not from the funder. So that if it doesn't pass park commission for whatever reason, or in your case, it does pass park commission because you have 4-3, it would still come here as part of the process because we have a donor who's at the table, and then you as a city council would decide if you're going to take that donation or not. But you as that park commissioner would say your arguments to why you feel it's not necessary. But
Well, and ultimately, the acceptance of the donation or the paying for something that's not donated
Yep.
ultimately ends up in finance anyway because it involves money.
Yes.
Then you have a decision coming out of a standing committee that's coming to council, as well as the discussion from this advisory panel,
Yes.
right? So, Tom, you had a comment.
Thank you, Madam President. I was on the Parks and Rec Committee for, well, I am again, but for 8 years prior to this term, and, you know, and although I don't have, you know, meetings or minutes of meetings, I'll, you know, indelibly imprinted in my brain, but I just feel that there was always a feeling that we were empowered to a certain degree because we asked so much of staff, you know, on ongoing things. Can you look into this? I mean, we're really going to need this information, or, you know, we're going to have that map, you know, updated, or it was always, you know, staff, do this, do that, you know, as if like a directive. And although evidently we weren't, you know, empowered to do so. But I mean, it really did enable us to move along the work of the city with regards to parks. Now, in this new world scenario that we're talking about, you know, I kind of fear that that little bit of, you know, direction to staff goes away because we have to ask permission, or we have to go through the commission instead, you know, rather than, like you said earlier, we have, you know, 5 members here that are alders representing their neighborhoods, and they're very, like, you know, feet on the ground. You know, they know what the deal is, and they have issues, concerns, whatnot, that they're looking towards, you know, park staff to look into and to fix, or whatever, or to give information on, to give reports, all those kinds of things. I mean, we were pretty demanding for those 8 years. I'm sure, probably a pain. But going forward, you know, we're the county seat, and, you know, we, you know, call a lot of shots to our own parks and everything. And what does the new world order look like with regards to that kind of advocacy?
Didn't we have something just in last month in our Park and Rec Committee? I was on it when I first started on the council, and then when we decided to save the 3 outdoor pools, then I moved on to other committees because that was my mission. But, and there was some robust discussion there too, but just last month in the Park and Rec Committee, we had an item where the action that we were asked to vote on was a recommendation to the County Park Commission. So it wasn't that you were making the final decision, your resolution was worded such that as that body, you were recommending to the County Commission to take an action. And so rather than make the decision ourselves, recognizing the situation that we are in right now, we already were making a recommendation to the body that actually had the authority. Would we continue something like that? Is that how you see it, or?
Yeah, that would be how I see it. And honestly, Tom, I don't see anything changing. I think
Well, I don't know.
There's still a lot of questions that are had, and
I'm afraid I do see things changing, though, in that I could see where a city parks committee meeting might come up with something like, you know, we dealt with, you know, remediation of this, that, or the other thing. Yes, we'd like to direct staff to go, you know, get some information for us. Well, we're going to have to go to the commission to see if we can do that. Do we have to get permission, you know, for that kind of request? Is it going to be added, you know, bureaucratic, you know, hoops to jump through, or will the committee be able to work with staff directly with expectations of cooperation, or is it going to be that we're one step removed?
you mean if it's an advisory committee? Is that what you're asking?
Sure.
In my mind, I guess the way that this would work is I don't see that changing as yes. The answer to my mind is if we're working within a committee, whether you're advisory or otherwise, is yes, you're asking us to get all the information so that you can make an informed recommendation to the park commission. I don't see ever having to ask the commission on either side, city or county, for permission to do anything. If there is a topic that needs to be put on an agenda that you need, you know, staff to do background work on so that we can present it properly at the whatever committee it's going to, we do that anyway.
You know, I always looked at the committee as essentially an advisory committee anyways, because, you know, we would make recommendations to council and that sort of thing. We work with staff, it would go to council. We weren't, sitting there with bags of money, making things happen ourselves. We had to go through finance, or we had to go
Right.
through a capital improvements, process or whatever. So I just want to make sure that, that we're not losing the immediacy of cooperation with staff, because I think that's really key to us getting answers, making recommendations, that sort of thing.
I think it is too, and I think if we can get the commitment that the staff would staff it the same way and inform us the same way, it's not, I think I understand what you're getting at, and is if there's a project that is, or information gathering that's somewhat time intensive, that we would need permission to use the staff's time. And I think that to make an educated decision, if you would staff it the same way and create the information the same way, that makes this decision easier than adding that, permissive process like Tom mentioned. So, if we could staff it the same way, get information the same way, and that the decisions that come out of it are recommendations to the other entity, I think that makes it an easier and clearer path for us to do something with going forward. Lou?
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question would be for the city attorney. What would need to be done? I don't quite know how to say this, but to empower the Parks Commission. What would need to be done to change that agreement from 1974. So we do have the power, as Alder Neal, just got done describing, empowering things that need to be done in our city, where we have the power to speak for our constituents, the people that elected us, because, the way this is sliding, I'm seeing this go is that, we are going to be losing control over our city parks, and maybe we need to have a city parks commission or city parks, and have the county have their parks commission, and abolish the joint parks commission. I don't know, but I just I don't like the slippery slope we're looking at here by relinquishing power and control over our
Yeah,
city parks.
I think that's a
Thank
good
you.
question for Ann. If we had shared membership, and assuming, at first, shared membership succeeds when everyone's present. So I think it's important to know that whatever three voices we have at that table, those three voices have to be actively engaged in the process. So, it's not helpful when only one member can make the meeting. So I think that's one thing that we have to make sure is clear as well, that, whoever we put on it and whenever that committee meets, it has to be at a reasonable time that people that work can attend it as well. Ann, did you have an answer for what it would take to shift the whole thing?
Yeah, I think so, and I want to add a little context to Jamie's outline. The 2002, when Mayor Lawrence created that committee, actually, Public Health and Safety had 2 meetings in a row where they considered creating an entire chapter, 2.85, called the Parks and Recreation Committee. And they had a whole list of duties, and it went to council, and then it went, or PH&S, it went back to council, council referred it back to PH&S, and then it died there. So they'd already thought about this being an advisory sort of committee, and they listed out, all the powers and duties they wanted them to maintain. So if you go back to the statute, which Jamie had fully in her slide, but it's not the part that's highlighted, it says the powers hereby conferred may be exercised by the county board in any city if they adopt these mirroring resolutions, designating the particular park function, duty, or act, and the terms, if any, upon which the same shall be exercised by the county board. Such resolutions shall also state whether the authority or function is to be exercised exclusively by the county or jointly by the county and the city, and shall also state that the exercise of such power by the county is in the public interest. I think that's the piece that we were missing. Well, then when this ordinance that creating an advisory body failed, then The next thing we see is City Parks and Recreation Committee just shows up in the list of standing committees in the council rules in Chapter 216 with no duties or anything attached to it. So it's really hard to piece together what was going on, but typically your standing committees have the authority to pass on actions to the council to take action, only if the council has the authority to take action on what it's taking action on.
So does that further make the case
So-
for a decently drafted contract? I mean,
Well, all of those things. I think you could terminate the whole shebang on 12 months' notice. You could go back and retool mirroring resolutions that dig down into these duties, but it might be easier to do a contract. I think it would be much easier to do a contract for services, which they tried twice and which Jamie has a draft of, than to go back and change any resolutions or anything.
I guess from what I observed from what you just read us is that we have no control, the county has all the control.
I have surmised that because we didn't specifically retain anything, that we did give them all the power and authority. So that's why I'm having a little trouble struggling as to how and why we would still meet, other than in an advisory capacity. And why you mentioned some things would go to council if it were involving budget or money, but otherwise it would go to the park commission. That sounds like it's complicating things for you.
I don't see it changing from really how I do it now.
Okay,
but
okay.
I
Yeah.
guess I'm just, I guess I'm just a little bit hesitant to, when I, like when somebody comes up to me with a question of 3M Park or something like that, well, you have to go to the county because, they have all the control, and I have a hard time when you say we have 39, what did you say? We had 39 city parks. How many county parks?
17.
How many?
17.
17 county parks, and we have no say over what goes on in our 39 city parks, other than a little itty-bitty voice with 3 members on a county board, on a county parks commission. It just,
The
It
acreage is more
just-
for county than the city.
it
though.
just doesn't sit right to me, with me. So that's where I would,
well, and
be
I think
interested.
that's exactly what we're going to have to puzzle on for a while. Like when we leave here, we have to be thinking about that. This all has worked for more than 50 years in the absence of a decently drafted contract, and we've not had ill effects from the way it's been operating. But that said, we've got a lot of non-standing committees, commissions, and boards that are very impactful. Bike and Pet is impactful. Liquor license review is impactful. Airport's impactful. This could be too. But, I think that it's maybe easier to operate within our authority and offer more voices at the table, which is what the non-standing option would still give us. But if the contract is drafted properly, we should be able to succeed with what we've already got in place without having to blow up the entire agreement and retool. I think if they had had the right contract in 2002, we may not have been off the rails when COVID started, right?
Very possibly.
Yeah. The
So-
other thing we have to think about too is before 2002, from 1974 to 2002, it did operate. None of us here
Right.
have knowledge of that. The only people here have knowledge of how it's worked for the past however,
17,
yeah,
Ish.
long years. So
right?
which is different because that was just a practice that was put in place by who knows
Right.
who. So we're just trying to make it. I honestly think that if we have a good department put in place, we have very good people from the city council and the county board right now on the park commission. I have no problem with the city, however you want to do the parks committee or have input, but I do think if you let the process do what it's supposed to, and you have your strong city council representatives advocating for your city parks, and you have your strong county board members advocating for your county parks, and looking at the whole thing, the goal of the park commission is to look at the whole system as one system, and that it's the best system that we have in place for the community of Marathon County.
Well, and when that committee meets, I think it is incumbent upon all of the members around the table, the 3 and the 3, and the member at large, to recognize that whatever gets approved or advocated for, the bill for it rests with whomever is getting it. So if it's a city item, chances are those 3 county representatives certainly aren't going to vote against what the city reps are asking for, because the city reps are going to pay for it anyway, and vice versa. I mean, the city rep shouldn't be fighting a county project because we're not paying for that anyway. So, I think at some point, the common sense function of them around the table will become obvious, right? So
Yeah, if
it
there's
may already
anything-
be.
Yeah, and I think just knowing the different committee members, I do think that, the only way that a county board member is going to vote down a city project is for environmental and morale issues. I mean, like the PFAS is a good example. That could be very well one that would have gone to the park commission that I could see not passing the park commission because we could have had more voice on there about, your concerns that you brought up at that committee than we had at the park committee. So that's the only, I think you hit it right on the head. If everybody's looking at the park system as a whole and the benefit for the community, they're going to advocate for what's right in each area, and only time they will not support something is if it genuinely doesn't seem right, doesn't smell right, has an adverse effect in one area or not. I think that's what.
Well, and they already operate heavily guided by the advice of staff. I mean, always, with everything we do in all of our committees, there's a staff recommendation, because none of us are experts, and I think that commission is probably also dependent upon Jamie and her team to, met out what is reasonable and what isn't. Because, I mean, in all of our committees, we ask the staff for guidance all the time, because none of us knows. Does anybody else have?
I would
Let's
just
go
like
Lou
to-
and then Vicky.
Oh, I would just like to add that this non-standing committee was talked about briefly, and
Right, just last month.
just briefly. It wasn't,
Right.
it wasn't thrown down our throats or anything. It was just talked about
Right,
briefly.
just, it was floated as an idea, and then we
Yes,
figured we'd bring it
yes.
here tonight. Then we can all think about it for a while again, because it'll come up again in committee and at council. Vicky?
My question is we've got Jamie, who you've done a wonderful job this evening sharing all this information. I'm sure it took you a lot of time to put this all together. But what happens when there's a personality conflict like there was with, obviously, the Linda Lawrence issue there? I mean, we've got great people in good places right now, but that might not be the case 15 years from now. And again, by the city giving up all of this, then what happens?
I think that's why we're advocating for the intergovernmental agreement now, to make it clear for the next predecessor to me, to my staff, to the next city council, to the next county board, what those expectations are. Because Ann can go back and tell you how many times she's gone back through all those resolutions when there has been a question come up about, whether we want to break up the joint agreement, or whether we want to add the committee or this or that, where our work now that we've worked on along with our corporation council for the Marathon County is to set that right and to memorialize all of that work that was done to form what we have now and to set the stage going forward. And that agreement isn't going to be one, I guess in our mind, and Ann, correct me if I'm wrong, it isn't one that we just do and then put on the shelf. In the agreement, we have that we will review it annually because things change, budgets change, staffing might change, new opportunities might come. So it would be something that it would be in place, so the expectations are there, and it would be kind of, this is how we work. And I know what's expected of me as a director, and so would the next director. But it would be looked at every year.
That's helpful. Carol?
Thanks, Jamie. So if, say, we did go back to the 1974, whatever, and just split them, I mean, the benefit of it right now, even for like equipment and things like that, both side pays, right? So I mean, would that stuff change or not? Do you know what I mean? Financially, or does that not really have anything to do with any of it?
If we terminated the agreement?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
because
yeah,
we'd
that
have to
would
create our own city department. We'd
Yeah,
be paying
so
for
it would be a
everything.
lot
Our
of money.
staff, our
Made-
equipment,
Yeah.
they'd have to pay for their own.
Major money, because we'd have
Yeah.
to staff up and buy the half of equipment that we don't have.
Yeah,
So-
that's what, okay.
Right. Go ahead, Gary.
Through the last 20 years or so, the committee, the Park and Rec Committee has built, along with the staff as well as your leadership, has built a strong park system in the city of Wausau. I mean, neighborhood parks, main parks, that committee in our memory has really moved, I think, the park system along a great way. I mean, a lot of neighborhood parks, tot lots, a lot of new things that have come into the city, and because of this Park and Rec Committee, I think, a lot of ideas being generated. And when I go back and talk to my constituents, that's their memory. That's how they feel they got this park system that they have. So what am I going to be telling my constituents? Because whether they perceive it or not, they're going to have a sense of some degree of loss of city. I mean, the park system is perhaps in my view, one of the strongest assets of this committee, of this city. And I'm really, walk down any street and it's a strong park system. And I think there's a sense that some of that being changed because of moving from these 5 members of a committee into some advisory committee are going to somehow lose something or lose something of our park system.
Right.
I mean, this is just sort of me, but I have a sense that of my constituents, I have to go back and somehow convey that the new thinking that this city council is going to be presenting. And right now, I need to hear a lot more with regard to defining specifically, strictly what policies the city council does have. It's more than just finances. It's the aesthetic of the city of Wausau's parks. And I think I need to know how that is going to be different. Thank you.
Well, I guess, I guess one thing I will add to that is I think that you have to think also through all of those years that a lot of the improvements of the city have been driven by the staff and not necessarily the Parks Committee. They're brought to the Parks Committee, and the Parks Committee works on them and gives input and provides that. But we as staff have a plan that the city council approved, the outdoor recreation plan on both the city and the county side. We have an expectation in that document of what improvements need to be made within our city parks. And right now, you have a department who, with no agreement, has a very good vision in mind of how we want the city parks to be, whether we're county employees or not. We have your best interests as a city council in mind, and that's how it's been for the last 50 years to get us where we are today. So I think those ideas and the improvements to parks are still advocated from your Parks and Recreation Department, which is us. It doesn't matter whether we're city employees or county employees. It is our job to beautify the parks of the city of Wausau and Marathon County, and we have plans in place. And I think that is one of the change that will come out of it is if this agreement is finally put in place, then there's actual expectations documented of what you as a city council expect of me and my department going forward to improve your park system. Because majority of those improvements or end-of-life things start with staff. We know the park system, we know the plans, we know what needs to be done. When the pools were failing and we needed to replace it, that came out of staff, and then it was taken further with that committee. So it isn't, the park commission is meant to do that exact same thing. And those 3 city council members on there are meant to be your advocates as a city council that brings it back to the whole council to make that ultimate decision. And, whether you have a parks committee or not, if we have any major projects like that, I could see us putting together, just like we did with the dog park, we put together a subcommittee for the dog park to build a dog park. If we had something major like that, I could see us doing the same thing to get dedicated eyes on that project to look at funding, to look at the need. I mean, we do that on the county side as well. We're doing it for the West Side Master Plan. We're going to have a meeting for a trail to Merrill. I mean, we do that all the time. That is not going to change. We have that direction set. And if you put this agreement in place, it just sets it even further. Because right now, I mean, if I don't bring anything to committee, you've got nothing to talk about
Right.
as it's worked.
So the contract would have some benchmark measurements also, like for what's expected of both sides. But then also, if we went to the non-standing committee model, that non-standing committee can still entertain public comment, it can entertain public engagement. I mean, we do all of that on airport now. And so that those voices don't go away. And we know that we have members in common that are there listening. So, and the fact that right now, legally, like Ann told us, we don't have the authority right now, but stuff is still working and the work is still getting done. So it really is a matter of formalizing and codifying what they're really already doing and what they've been doing for a really long time. And but for the facility closures during COVID, we may still not know this, but yet they're still doing the work every day. So that I think is important. But, you know, as we leave here tonight, those are the things that we have to weigh in our minds because, you know, within the next few months, this stuff is going to come forward again in our committees for some decisions. So, Terry.
Feels like thank you, Madam Chair. It feels like the majority of the things we've been discussing tonight are functional, okay? The staff directs, the staff knows about the park, the county does this. If the city wants more services, the city will pay for more services. If they want less services, they'll pay for less service. And that's fair. But what Alder Gisselman and Alder Neal and Alder Larson were talking about are the feet on the ground for that Park and Recs Committee. Those are people who are representing the constituents, the feelings of the constituents, and it feels like a much more effective way to represent the city people. Functionally, the county's wonderful, and they work together marvelously with the city as far as function and payment, but it feels like there's more to consider here. It feels like we're forgetting about the representatives of the people, and that Park and Recs Committee does that probably in a better way, just my opinion. So I hate to see that dissolve.
That's Sarah and then Carol.
I guess it just sort of seems like the Park and Rec committee sort of was more of a mirage, like just an expectation of what we thought it was, but it really hasn't been that way for 50 years. So we sort of had this assumption of how it was running, even though that's not how it was running. And so now that it's going to change to how it should run, we're having problems with that conversion. So, I mean, I think it's nice to have like I don't know, a platform to air things, but I mean, maybe it's just about re-education, education on these are the things we've been in, and having the contract is actually a way to pin the county down better and protect our citizens more, right? And getting what we actually pay for.
Yep, and you get what you pay for sure. But the other thing to it is the County Park Commission is an open meeting too, so the public can come into that, so.
Is that recorded? Not yet,
It's
right?
recorded, because I always do WebEx, so it's always recorded on WebEx, it's just not televised. Yeah, but we have the recording. And also, just I wanted to say too, is it is the city council, you know, all of you, whether you're on the Parks Committee or not, if you have any park-related items, you can, at any time, you can bring them to me, you can take them to the chair of the committee, of any committee, and you can have it put on the agenda too and stuff like that. So you can bring those issues. So you are advocates. Just because there's 5 of the 11 of you on the Parks Committee, you all should be advocating for your park, but you're not all represented on the Parks Committee either because you've got 11 different districts. So it's no different on the Parks Commission. You have 3 now there, but if you have anything from a city, you either bring it to one of your aldermen who's on the Park Commission, you bring it to the chair of that commission, which we haven't set yet because we have our first meeting on Tuesday, or you bring it to me and I'll put it on the agenda for discussion. That would be no different. So you're still, just like, I mean, I have 3 county board members out of 38 on the Park Commission. So 3 are not representing they're representing the whole county, but they're not representing even near the constituents. So that's the job of those commission members, is to advocate and get the input from your colleagues from all your other districts too. That would be the county board supervisor's job also, is to talk with, the person that represents Edgar or whatever, all over, because there's only 3 out of 38 on there. So you actually have more representation locally than they do as a whole county board.
Okay. Yep,
But acreage-wise, we have more county park acreage than we do city park acreage. So essentially, the land is more on the county side.
so Carol has a comment yet, and then I think we're kind of winding down. We're almost to 9:30, so.
Yeah, thank you. It says on page 19 of your presentation, the city has appropriated the money to pay the county per the 1974 resolution, but no contract clarifying expectations was developed, and I know that's what we're talking about. So 2 things. It seems to me that, like, as I've thought this through more, like, okay, so we could, either way, this has already been set out. So, like, the county, the commission, according to the statutes, right, has it already set this way, correct? Is that correct?
The resolutions have said it.
Or the resolution?
How we operate today, yes.
Yeah, the resolution,
Yes.
okay. So we could either say, okay, no, if we don't want to do that, and if we wanted to go back to the 1974, and then we'd be stuck paying for everything, or we can contract with, right? And so, I guess, just thinking it through, like Alder Watson was saying, I'm not articulating this very well, but in that way, we're not losing anything, because the situation is already as it is. Like she said, maybe we've had this imagined, control. So, but my question is, it says ordinance updates to reflect intergovernmental agreement. So what kind of ordinance updates would that be? That you may not be able to answer that tonight, but is this ordinance updates in how, like, what the different maybe duties, or is it with fees, or do you know what I mean? What kind, I guess, is what I'm wondering.
All of that, and we've put in ours. We already have drafted ordinance amendment changes. So Jamie and I have both been through them, not only to remove where the park committee name appears, but to double check then that if we insert park commission, or is that going to work in that spot depending on what the sentence says? Or like you said, who's enforcing stuff, who's collecting the fees, who's doing this duty? Or the city forester is supposed to be employed by the city, but they're employed by the county.
Well, they're supposed to be employed by the park committee, according to
That's
the
true.
ordinance.
Our ordinance says the committee's supposed to hire and fire the city forester. So that was another little detail we wanted to nail down in our contract for services.
So cleaning it all up, basically.
Absolutely.
That's what you're talking about,
Absolutely.
right?
It
Okay.
doesn't change operations.
So that
Yeah,
work
thank
already
you.
was underway, though, at the end of the last term, right? Because we already were heading down a path where we knew that in the next term, something was going to have to happen. And that's why we were seeing in the first wave of committee assignments that there wasn't a spot to select. When the clerk sent her document out, there wasn't a spot to even select Park and Rec as a preference, because the notion was that the work had been done as we were trying to clean up the committee descriptions and the duties. All the committees were working to make sure that what we said they did, they did. We changed the name of one, we were trying to really clean that up for this term for all of us. So you had that work in progress already, right? To
Yes.
start to fix the code. Okay. So, and that really is just kind of what we have to think. We're here only for information tonight, so we don't have to make any decisions, but, just keep thinking on that, I guess, Michael.
Yeah, I just, not to prolong things, but I just wanted to kind of put my 2 cents worth in. And I think Alder Watson really hit the nail on the head that the Park and Rec Committee is kind of a mirage. And our real power as a body consists of those 3 members on the County Parks Commission. And we do need to utilize it more. I guess up until this night, I really didn't understand the full capacity and power that that commission has. And now I'm kind of surprised that we're not leveraging that commission. So I do see the importance of the commission. I think moving the Parks and Recs Committee to an advisory body might be the best route to go, along with a strong agreement between the city and the county, so that, we do know that the things we want done will get done. So, thank you.
Okay. So we've had a lot of questions. We've had quite a bit of discussion. Does anybody have any final questions?
I
ahead.
just have one final thought, and that is, I don't have a problem with maintaining the agreement that's worked for years and years and years, but what I do have a problem is losing the empowerment of the Parks and Rec Committee, and if there was some way we can incorporate it all in the contract before we sign, I think that's something that we all should sleep on, because I think our citizens, our constituents deserve that. Thank you.
Did you have any closing comments, Mayor? You look like you
Well,
had a
yeah,
thought.
just a couple of thoughts. Alder Larson, maybe, I don't know if he meant to suggest that maybe we need to look at breaking away. I think I heard this is unique, or maybe very unique. We don't have this agreement, or you don't have this agreement with any other city in the county.
No.
And there's not many of these agreements in the state
Right, or the country.
or the country.
Yeah.
Okay.
We have been asked, though, by multiple municipalities in the area to do this, and so we've given numbers, like to Corona, Wetter, and Weston, but nothing's happened. at the
Okay.
moment.
So I guess, I guess, if we're gonna do something, we should understand the financial implications. Do we have a per acre or per capita cost that it cost to run the parks compared to, say, Oshkosh, Eau Claire, La Crosse, or even more locally, Schofield, Rothschild? I don't know the answer to that. And I apologize if this is a dumb question, but do we have parks guys or parks people plowing roads in the wintertime for the county?
No, as far as like the highway department?
Right.
No, our department only plows city and county facilities like we do our city parks, our county parks. We do the courthouse, parking lot. We have different city and county facilities that we do.
Parts of
as far as
the River Edge Trail, right? You
Yep.
leave open year-round?
Yep, yes, yep. So we did that a couple of years ago. For the Parks Committee, we had it broken down with how many hours we do snow plowing for both city and county. Same with mowing, and it's pretty even with what we do, just based on the number of hours it takes to do this parking lot versus this parking lot and mow this park versus this park. So, but no, our guys are not called to any other department to plow with Public Works or with Highway or anything like that, no. And if they were, they would be charged to the county, but we don't do that.
Well, and I think just in the context of talking about, like splitting things, I think that discussion has reared its head over the years from different people. And, it was interesting anecdotally that we talked about the fact that the committee arose out of personalities. And I will say that long about maybe 2010 or 2011, in a fit of personality, I started my own conversation about something similar. And along with a former alder who at one point had been the city attorney, and he and I were angry about something that either happened or didn't happen, and it had to have been pool related, I'm sure, because that's all we thought about at the time. And so that, though we had this discussion about what it would cost to take control of these things and split it all up, and the reality is, in talking with the former park director about that, was that it would be a historically expensive divorce, because these things have been merged and costs have been shared, both in terms of equipment and human resources for such a long time, that both entities would lose in that arrangement, because one has to completely staff up and equipment up, and the other one loses half of their stuff. And so I think we all walked away from that conversation calmer, realizing that to blow it all up and start over was really a disservice to the public. So we backed off those discussions back then, but it had to have come out of the pool discussion, because that's really what he and I were focused on at the time, and we both were representatives of pool facility districts, so.
Yeah, I'm not
Mayor.
suggesting a divorce, but I'm suggesting a
We were.
look at cost, a cost analysis so that we understand, are we getting the value we think we're getting? Are the splits right? Maybe we're not paying enough, I don't know. But I think more than likely, we were looking at zero-based budgeting potentially on Parks and Rec as our first opportunity. This would give us an opportunity to get a closer look at where the money's being spent.
For sure. So,
And we have all that because we bill you monthly, so we know exactly where
there
the
you
money's
go.
being
We
spent.
know exactly.
That's why we picked it, because it would be easy.
There you go. That's
Hopefully with
smart
the
place to
reports
start.
work out of workday, that's the
Smart
only question.
place to start. So with that, we have really had an in-depth discussion. Are you guys satisfied with what you know today, that we can take this up going forward? Carol?
Can I just say one last?
Certainly.
Mr. Mayor, coming from a teacher, there are no dumb questions.
There are not. There are certainly not. So, right? So I think we're good with that. So we'll let this discussion just rest for a little bit. We'll think about it. And then as these items start to come to committees, we'll remember this conversation and what we learned here. And I'm sure that our staff will be there to guide us. So go ahead, Jamie.
So one question going forward, by the monthly calendar, we're technically supposed to have a park committee and a park commission agenda, our meeting Monday and Tuesday. Is that too soon to start the process of bringing these two discussions back through, or should I hold off? That would put it to the July meetings. Or I guess maybe a suggestion you have the agreement in your packet of what we put together. My idea was, because it's been looked at by both city and county attorneys, was to bring it through both entities, but maybe being that it's more beneficial to the city to have this agreement than the county, because the county right now has the authority, but the city, if you want to set the expectations, maybe we start with the agreement coming through the city. And even though the Parks Committee doesn't have, I guess that's what I need advice on from our city attorney, is it's not gonna, there's no financial implication of the agreement, because it's just work that we do today. And, please note that I budget just like your Public Works Director does, your ED Director, your HR Director, like, you approve the budget like everybody else. So it's not any different, and it's not costing you any more to do this. And
It
I do.
does feel like maybe it should be considered in at least two of our committees, standing or non-standing. I think Park and Rec is already involved, and they've been involved. But I also think that the authority to enter into a contract, money or no money, always has rested with finance, because the park department in general, contract or no, costs money.
Yep.
So I do feel like it should go to both places.
So we'll start with the Parks Committee and then go through finance. Before I take it, I was going to take through the county first, but I think after hearing a lot of discussion, we should probably take it through the city first, so you're okay with the language, and that includes all the language. Then I'll run it past our county attorney again, our corp counsel, to make sure he doesn't have any, legal changes on the county side, make sure that both attorneys, and then we'll take it through the Park Commission to pass through the county board. Does that sound?
Does that sound fair? We're nodding. Everybody seems that seems like fair.
Okay.
We've learned an awful lot tonight. Is next week too soon? I feel like we've got a lot of knowledge. I mean, waiting a month really isn't going to get us more knowledge. You guys okay if she starts?
I'll get the agenda out tomorrow.
Okay. With that, then we've had a good discussion here tonight, even though the hour runs late. Thank you, everybody, for hanging in there.
Thank you very much.
We'll take a motion to adjourn. Motion from Killian, second by Martins. Members in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Nobody's ever opposed. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you all.